Hello everybody and welcome to this week's live class, which is titled Wellbeing for Energy. I'm delighted to welcome Ruth Tongue, who will be taking over in just a moment. Ruth's a qualified nutritionist and has been working in the industry for over 10 years. As a nutritionist and health expert, she contributes to national and international publications, as well as regularly appearing as a nutrition and health expert for the BBC. A real authority in her field, you'll have the chance to ask her questions at the end. For now, though, I shall just hand you over to our presenter, Ruth, to take on this live class.
Hi everyone, thank you James for such a nice intro, and thank you all for joining, taking the time out to find out some more about wellbeing for energy. I know you're probably all very busy or perhaps enjoying the lovely sunshine today, but I really appreciate you all joining. So I'm going to get started straight away because we've got quite a lot to get through. So I'll just give you a brief outline of the session to begin with. So first of all, we're going to be looking at some of the different foods that you can have in your daily diet to boost your energy, and also we'll be looking at some of the foods that will be actually taking back that energy, so really sort of causing those energy dips, whether it's after lunch or first thing in the morning. So the focus will be food to begin with. We're then going to move on to look at some sleep habits that you can start to create, because obviously if we're not sleeping well, our energy levels aren't going to be maximised. We're then going to look at ways that you can utilise exercising and physical activity to boost energy, and perhaps there might be some surprises about certain types of exercise that will be, again, robbing that energy. Finally, we'll be looking at some focus areas, so you can actually decide that you might like to set some goals in some of these areas. And then I'll briefly just be talking about the weekly wellbeing course that you have available to you. So I hope that all sounds good. So let's get cracking with looking at some of our energising foods. So the first category that I want to talk about, which perhaps is no surprise to you all, is vegetables and fruit. And there is a reason I've put vegetables and fruit rather than fruit and veg. So why do we need fruit and vegetables in our diet to begin with? Well, you probably all know that fruit and vegetables are high in fibre, and fibre is one of the main things that not only helps to improve digestion, but also it helps to slow down the release of sugar in the body. So if you're having, say, a boiled sweet compared to an apple, which does have sugar in it, the fibre in the apple will actually slow down that release of the sugar into the bloodstream. So you're not going to get that sudden spike of energy that you would have if you had that boiled sweet or perhaps a cereal bar or muffin, for example. Fibre also has many health benefits. It helps to lower cholesterol, and it's been shown independently that it reduces the risk of many cancers. But vegetables and fruit are also packed with vitamins. So you've got all of your immunity vitamins, so vitamin C, vitamin A or beta-carotene as it's also known. And they also contain many antioxidants, minerals that help to reduce infection and any sort of inflammation in the body. And these vitamins and minerals also contribute to your energy levels. So not only do you have the natural sugars found in the fruit and vegetables that will help to increase your energy, but you've also got this vast selection of vitamins that will independently work to boost your energy levels. And on top of that, fruit and vegetables are just a really easy, low-calorie snack. So they're a great thing to have. And some of the things that you might notice if you're not having enough vegetables and fruit are that you're perhaps constantly getting infections, perhaps you have inflammation in the body. It might manifest itself in things like mouth ulcers or lots of common colds, coughs, perhaps lots of stomach upsets, and this might be a key warning sign that perhaps you're not getting enough of your antioxidants and your vitamins. So something I've put here to note is that I always say to people, particularly clients that I see, is always eat your fruit rather than drink it. Now, obviously, I'm not saying never have a glass of orange juice again in your life, but I do see a lot of people and they say, oh, I get tons of vitamins, I have at least 3-4 glasses of orange juice a day. And really that's not a great way to get your fruit, because what happens is when you're having a glass of orange juice is that often all of the fibre is taken out of the fruit, So you're just left with a very sugary liquid. And this will be absorbed really quickly into the bloodstream. So you're just going to get a really quick spike of energy. But then very quickly after, you'll get that energy dip. So you're almost on this sugar roller coaster. And we're going to talk a lot about that sugar roller coaster a bit later. So as much as possible, try and eat your fruit rather than drink it. And I'd say instead of going for this kind of 5 a day message that has been drummed into us, and it's a good general message, I would say try and get 2 portions of fruit and 5 portions of veg a day. So it's a kind of a 2 and 5 rule. And this is a great aim to have. So moving on to our next food group that I would recommend boosting and having more of to boost your energy, we want to look at unrefined carbohydrates. Now you may know already what these are, but you may not have any ideas. So let's just have a look at what some of these unrefined carbohydrates would be. So there would be things like whole grain bread, brown rice, quinoa, oats, some that you may not have tried, things like buckwheat and spelt. These are some of your older, sort of more ancient grains. And all of these are really great because not only do they contain lots of fibre, but they also contain lots of your energy vitamins and nutrients. So, for example, all of the B vitamins, they're found in that outside part of things like your whole grains. And when you refine carbohydrates, so for example, if you take white pasta, it uses wheat that's had all of the outside of it removed. And that outside of the wheat, that's where you're getting all of the good energy and the vitamins. So if you get rid of that, you're taking out a lot of those nutrients. And apart from the energy vitamins, these vitamins and nutrients are also linked to immunity. Whole grains are shown to reduce your risk of certain cancers, boost your heart health, as well as boosting overall health and well-being and energy, like I mentioned. So how much carbohydrate or unrefined carbohydrate in particular should we have? Well, I would always say have a small portion at every meal. And by a small portion, I'd probably say that's about the size of your palm. So that's quite a good image to have in your head. And just to show you some more examples, things like popcorn, it's quite a surprising unrefined carbohydrate that you could have, and it's very high in fibre. So as long as you're not getting the popcorn that's covered in caramel or lots of sugar, then that's a really good option. Sweet potatoes are another really good unrefined carbohydrate, really packed with loads of beta-carotene, one of your best immunity vitamins. And then you've just got some oats and flapjacks there. So let's move on to look at our third food group that we can increase in our diet. And these are the essential good fats. And I've put a few pictures there. You'll probably see we've got some nuts and seeds, some avocado on toast, and some sardines. And these are all examples of foods that have plenty of these beneficial good fats. And there are tons of reasons why these good fats are healthy and helpful. There are lots of evidence to show that they reduce your risk of heart disease, any inflammation in the body, so inflammatory conditions, things like eczema, skin conditions, psoriasis, IBS, acne, arthritis, gout, rheumatoid arthritis, all of these conditions have been shown to be linked to having low levels of these beneficial good fats. And they also contribute to things like your hormones and your nails and all of the cells in the body. So they're really vital. And there's a strong link as well between mental health and mood and happiness and essential good fats. So it is really essential that you try and get enough of these in your diet. And as I mentioned, they're found in all of your nuts and seeds, things like beans, chickpeas, avocados, plenty of your vegetable oils, particularly the seed oils, and then your oily fish, so salmon, trout, sardines, herrings, kippers, if anyone still eats those. Probably the most common would be your salmon and trout and sardines. One thing to note is it doesn't need to be fresh fish. You can get sardines in a tin and they're equally packed with these essential good fats. And I'd say try and aim for at least 1 or 2 portions, if not more, of these beneficial fats each day. And that can be quite easy. It could just be a handful of almonds at your mid-morning snack, or a portion of olive oil on your salad, so it doesn't need to be difficult. So let's move on to our fourth food group to increase in the diet, and this would be lean protein. So some examples of what your lean protein would be. Obviously you have your meat, fish, eggs, but then things that are not animal-based, so beans, peas. Some of your vegan options would be things like soya or tofu, tempeh. All of these foods are really good sources of lean protein, as are your dairy products. Things like natural yogurt is one of the best sources. So why do we need protein? Well, you probably know already that proteins make up our muscles. So you'll often hear about people trying to bulk up and trying to eat a lot more protein. But also, protein is a key component of all of the enzymes and all of the hormones in our body. And these enzymes are the things that will help to control our energy levels, particularly how sugar and carbohydrates are handled in the body. And one thing to note is that if you don't have protein with a meal, what happens, it's like the fibre. That sugar that you're having, say you're having a baked potato, which is quite a high carbohydrate, and you're not having any protein or fibre with it, the carbohydrate will break down very quickly into sugar. So you'll get a quick energy spike, but then you get that dip after. Whereas if you had some protein with that baked potato, say you had some baked beans or a tin of tuna or some chicken, that protein actually helps to slow down the release of the sugar or the carbohydrate from the baked potato. So even though you're not actually having less of that carbohydrate or that sugar, which most people don't want to do, simply by adding some protein or some vegetables, or ideally both, you can slow down that effect of the sugar. So that's a good thing to try and aim for, is to have some protein every meal. And naturally, most of your protein foods tend to come in foods that contain iron. And iron is one of the big key nutrients for boosting energy. So something that I always say to people if they come to me and they say, well, I'm really suffering with low energy, is, well, how much protein do you have in your diet? Perhaps if they're vegetarian or vegan and they're not making an effort to increase their protein, it may be that they're lacking in iron. Or perhaps you're someone who doesn't eat a lot of red meat. So you may need to look at other sources to get that iron in your diet. So how much protein do we need? Well, as I mentioned, I'd recommend always having some protein at every meal, and perhaps having 1 or 2 protein snacks throughout the day. And they don't need to be massively high protein. You don't need to start taking protein shakes or extra protein bars. It could be something as simple as a Greek yogurt, or, like I mentioned before, a handful of almonds, or some hummus, for example. All of these are really good high protein snacks. If you are more active, say you do work out a lot, or you're training for an event, particularly an endurance event or something that you need to train really hard frequently, you may need to have a bit more protein. So just something to note is that on the flip side of having protein is that if you do have too much protein in the diet, particularly later in the day, it can affect your sleeping. So I'd say if you are someone who suffers from insomnia, or you really struggle to get to sleep, you may consider perhaps cutting your protein in the evening meal slightly. So, if you're someone who prefers to have a big evening meal, you might want to not have that big steak if you know that you tend to have trouble sleeping. So let's move on to our final food group to boost for energy. Although it's technically not a food, it's water. And, it's very easy to drink water on a day like today where it's really hot and we're sweating a lot, but most people generally tend to underdrink, and we tend to be slightly dehydrated. And the reason that it's so important to keep hydrated is that our body is made up of almost 2/3 of water, and this varies slightly from person to person. But water is needed for all of the functions of the body, particularly for your kidneys, for digestion, for keeping your blood at the correct concentration, but also for things like mental concentration and mood, feeling alert, feeling on top of your game when it comes to work and productivity. And just a 2% fall in hydration can actually lead to a 20% fall in performance and concentration. So even a tiny little tweak can have big effects on the body and your mental state. So it's really important that you keep hydrated. And it's recommended that we have about 1.5 to 2 litres of water a day, but more if you're exercising. And also on days like today where it is hot, you will need to have a bit more. So start to recognise, if you're someone who sweats a lot, again, you're going to need a lot more water than someone who doesn't sweat much at all. And it doesn't need to be plain water. It could be fruit teas, it could be herbal teas. If you prefer to have sparkling water, then that's okay. I'd say try and have some plain water, but sparkling water is still going to hydrate you. The things that don't count are any caffeinated drinks. So try not to have all of your liquids from teas and coffees. And we'll talk a bit more about caffeine anyway. So just something to note, the best way to check your hydration is to check the colour of your urine. Although it doesn't sound very nice, I know. But it should be pale yellow in colour. So let's move on to talk about those energy-robbing foods. Now I've tried to find quite an unappetising picture of a burger, although at this time of day it may not be that unappetising. But the first thing would be your sugar and refined carbohydrates. The second group would be the saturated fats and processed foods, of which these burger and chips would fall into that category. The third would be the red and processed meat. Again, burgers will fall into that category. Fourth would be alcohol and caffeine, and you're probably all booing me at this moment. And then the fifth would be skipping meals and crash dieting. So this is looking more at your eating habits rather than specific foods. So let's look at those 5 in a little more detail. So if we look at sugar and refined carbohydrates, and I've mentioned this already a little, but just looking at what might be a fairly typical day for you, or perhaps someone that you know, this is just to demonstrate that it's very easy to add up your sugar tally throughout the day without really realising it. So one of the most common breakfasts in the UK would be a bowl of cereal and milk. Perhaps you might have some fruit with it, perhaps a glass of juice. And already that will be around 10 teaspoons of sugar. For a mid-morning snack, you might decide to have a couple of biscuits, perhaps a piece of fruit. Already that's going to add up 6 or 7 teaspoons of sugar. For lunch, okay, you think, well, I might go for the healthier option, I'll go for the tomato soup and some bread. But even in that, you could be having at least 4, 5, even 6 sometimes teaspoons of sugar. And then in the afternoon, you decide, no, I'm going to be really healthy now. I'm going to go for a natural cereal bar. And unfortunately, these can be packed with, again, 6, 7, sometimes 8 teaspoons of sugar. And then at dinner, you think, okay, fairly plain dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, 1 gin and tonic. Again, that can be 7, 8 teaspoons of sugar. And then finally, again, thinking, okay, healthy kick, I'll have a fat-free vanilla yogurt and a piece of fruit. And again, that can be up to 10 teaspoons of sugar. So in one day, you've tallied up over 40 teaspoons of sugar. And that was, that's without having many sweets or cakes, not much, not many sort of junk foods as you would think. So the World Health Organization actually recommends that we all limit ourselves to 6 teaspoons of sugar, which, looking at this outline, could be quite tricky to do, but that's because most of these foods here are processed foods. So the best way that you can start to cut back on sugar is to try and make things from scratch as much as possible. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a little while. And I'm not going to dwell too much on sugar because I'm sure you've all read a lot about the negatives of sugar recently. But just to show a few reasons why we should generally try and cut back on sugar in the body. The picture on the right is actually a fatty liver, and this has been caused by someone who's had too much sugar in their diet. So not only can it affect your liver, but it causes weight gain, increases your risk of diabetes, actually damages and ages all of the cells in the body, and it can increase your appetite. And this is something that you may have noticed. The more sugar you have, the hungrier you tend to feel. And that's because you're constantly having those ups and downs, so that sugar roller coaster. But also things you might not think about in the long term, it can cause memory loss and increase your risk of inflammatory conditions like gout and arthritis. And something to note, which is really important, is that sugar isn't just the white sugar that you see in a packet that you would put into your cups of tea. Sugar is also found in syrups, jams, but mainly it's hidden in the foods that we eat every day. So things like your breakfast cereals, your cereal bars, your packet sauces, some of the worst culprits, things like your sweet and sour sauce that you buy out of a packet. They can have up to 40 teaspoons of sugar in. So the best thing to do is to start checking on your food labels. And one key figure to remember is that 1 teaspoon of sugar contains 4 grams. So if you look on a packet and you see that a cereal bar has 16 grams of sugar, you know that it's got 4 teaspoons of sugar. So it's a lot of sugar in that small little cereal bar. So that's just quite a good number to remember. 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. And I've mentioned this sugar roller coaster, and that's just showing it again. Following on from breakfast, if you're going for something like Special K, which actually is not a healthy option really, it's high in sugar, it doesn't have much fibre, it doesn't have much protein. You get that quick spike, and then you get a dip, and you think, okay, I'll have perhaps a coffee and a banana. A banana is a slightly better choice than a chocolate bar, but it's still fairly high sugar. So you're going to get that boost again, and then that dip. And then perhaps you go for a baguette, again quite high carbohydrate, perhaps you don't have much protein in that baguette, so you get that boost and then you get that dip again. So it's that sugar roller coaster going on throughout the day. So let's move on to look at our saturated fats and some of our processed foods. So the reason that these foods will affect our energy, well, there are many reasons, but one of the main reasons is that anything that's highly processed, high in saturated fats will tend to be higher in calories, higher in fat, higher in sugar, salt, additives. And all of these things are really difficult for the body to deal with. So not only will your digestion be under stress, but also if you're having a very salty meal or salty snack, your kidneys are going to be under stress. Also your liver. Your liver is the place that deals with all of the fats and also to some extent the sugar. So if these organs are really stressed out, it means that your energy levels, all of the energy in your body will be going to those organs. So you're not going to have any energy left. So you're going to feel really flat and you're going to feel tired and struggling. So that's why many of these processed foods and saturated fats will affect your energy. And just a good quote that is from one of my favourite books, if any of you are interested in reading a little further, Michael Pollan, he's an American food scientist. His quote is, "Don't eat anything incapable of rotting." And I think this is quite sensible. You know, we're so used to having foods that we can keep forever and ever, but actually these aren't the foods that are going to be giving us anything. We'd be much better off eating fresher foods, even, you know, bread that goes off in a couple of days rather than a couple of weeks, because you know that those foods aren't going to have so many additives and sort of added nasties as such. So let's move on to look a little at red and processed meats. And recently, I think it was perhaps a few months ago, perhaps it was a bit earlier in the year, the World Cancer Research Fund actually changed their recommendations to say that processed meat is now classified as a definite cancer cause. And when I'm saying processed meat, I mean things like sausages, ham, bacon, all of your sort of meat pies, any of your kind of reformed burgers and sausage rolls that you get. And this is a really big for the World Cancer Research Fund to declare this, they must have some pretty good evidence behind this. Red meat has also been declared as a probable cancer cause. So again, that's quite a big statement for them to make, and it's not a statement that they can make lightheartedly. So ideally, red meat should be limited to twice a week max, and processed meat as little as possible. So alternatives would be to choose fish, chicken, turkey, and then also trying to have some non-animal sources of protein. So things like beans, nuts, seeds, peas, chickpeas, things like that. So I have mentioned caffeine a little already, but caffeine is one of our biggest energy robbers, and it's very similar to sugar in the way that it acts on the body. So if you imagine that roller coaster, caffeine has the same effect. So you have, say you have a Starbucks Americano or whatever your Starbucks drink of choice is in the morning. You get a very quick energy boost, but then very quickly after you're going to get that dip. And then that's when you start to crave more pick-me-ups, so whether it's a chocolate bar or some more caffeine. And then you have that spike again when perhaps you do have your double espresso, but then very quickly after you get that dip. So again, you're constantly on this up and down throughout the day. And what happens is that if you're constantly on this up and down, your body needs more of it to achieve those ups. So it's like any kind of addiction. The more you have, the more you need to satisfy that addiction. So although, there have been studies to show that a little caffeine is definitely not bad for us, and teas and coffees do have some beneficial effects. So I'm certainly not saying never have teas and coffees, particularly because they're quite enjoyable. I would just say, particularly if you find that you're struggling with energy or struggling with sleep or struggling with hunger cravings or perhaps mood swings, then I would look at your caffeine intake and try and cut back to perhaps 2 caffeinated drinks a day. And particularly if you are struggling with sleep, then I would say limit those to the morning, because your caffeine can actually stay in your bloodstream for up to 8 hours. So if you're having a caffeinated drink at 4 in the afternoon, it could still quite likely be in your bloodstream by the time you go to bed. And then alcohol. So alcohol, as well as having long-term damaging health effects, has the same effect on your energy as sugar and caffeine. And one of the main reasons that it does this is it's going to cause those blood sugar spikes and dips, but it also reduces the absorption of your B vitamins. And your B vitamins are your key energy vitamins. So this is one of the reasons that we all always feel so low and sluggish and hungover after a big night out drinking, is that your body hasn't absorbed these energy vitamins. So not only that, but it also causes dehydration. And like we looked at before, dehydration will affect your energy and your concentration and your mood. And alcohol will affect your sleep quality, which means that again it's a downward spiral, so your energy vitamins are low, perhaps you haven't slept as well, so it's all adding up to not feeling great. And then on top of this, alcohol can also lower your immunity, which is one of the reasons why if you do drink a lot, perhaps you have a lot of late nights out, you'll find that you're more likely to pick up coughs and colds and perhaps stomach bugs. So the final thing that we're going to mention when it comes to food habits are skipping meals and crash dieting. Now, I could probably talk to you for hours, and that's probably a completely different seminar about all of the different fad diets and why none of them are sustainable, but I won't bore you with all of that. We'll just look a little at what happens to your body when you do skip meals. So obviously, first of all, your sugar levels and your energy levels fall. The brain function decreases and your mood decreases, and that's when you'll start to get those common hangers, or you start to get irritable when you haven't eaten. One of the main things that will happen is your body will go into this starvation mode, and this is one of the worst things that can happen if you're looking to lose weight, because actually what happens is your body will be hanging on to any energy that it does have, whether it's in the form of fat or sugar in your body, which is obviously the opposite of what we want to happen if we are trying to lose weight. So I'd always recommend to people that you don't leave longer than between sort of 3 to 4 hours between meals, and try and have something as soon as you can in the morning. Now, if you're not a breakfast person, then that's understandable. Some people don't want a big meal first thing in the morning, but try and work out something that you could have, whether it's even just something simple like a handful of nuts or a piece of fruit or a yogurt. Just something that starts to rev up the body and kickstart your metabolism. Because overnight everything shuts down, so all of your body's functions will slow down. And having breakfast is one of the best ways to get all of those functions up and running again. And it's like a fire. If you don't put any fuel into that fire, it's going to die out, and then you're not going to be revved up and working efficiently. So those were my top 5. Oh, sorry, just moving on to show you a quick diagram for an infographic. This was just a nice image that I found to show that people who do skip breakfast tend to have 40% more sweets throughout the day, 55% more soft drinks, almost half the amount of vegetables as people who don't skip breakfast. So it's really important, and it's an old it's an old phrase, I know, but eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper, something like that. You get the idea. Breakfast is important. So let's look a little at sleep now, and on the food theme. There are some foods that you can have that will actually help to boost your sleep, and again there are foods that will obviously hinder your sleep. So some of the 3 main food groups or types of food that will help to boost your sleep are foods that contain tryptophan. Now, tryptophan is a neurotransmitter, and it basically helps to make you sleepy. So it's a calming neurotransmitter. So foods that are high in tryptophan are things like your carbohydrates, oats, also bananas, and some of your proteins, so things like turkey and chicken naturally cause the release of this tryptophan. So these are all good things to have in the evening. Carbohydrates, like I mentioned, they are calming, so they slow you down a bit, which is why it's better to have slightly higher carbohydrates in the evening if you are struggling with sleep than having, say, a big carbohydrate lunch, because most people will find that if they have a big carbohydrate lunch, say you have a big plate of pasta or a jacket potato at lunchtime, perhaps an hour later you're going to get that dip in the afternoon, when really that's when we want to be working on the top form. So having a bit more protein at lunchtime and slightly less carbohydrate may be a good option for you. Magnesium-rich foods will also help to sort of calm the body, and they're very relaxing as well. So if you're someone who's struggling with stress or anxiety, I will often say try and get a few more magnesium-rich foods in the diet. So these would be all of your nuts and seeds, your raw cocoa or cacao, so a good excuse to have some dark chocolate, but also things like beans and lentils. They're all high in magnesium. And then we've got some of the foods that will stop you falling asleep or hinder your switching off. And perhaps not surprising, these would be things like your fatty foods, alcohol, spicy foods even, very high protein foods like steak, and caffeine. So these are the foods to avoid in your evening meal. And if you can't avoid them completely, then perhaps just look at cutting back slightly or adding some of the other helpful foods to your evening meal. And then if we look a little more at sleep, sleep is one of the things that most people tend to neglect, and it's one of the biggest lifestyle factors that I think, particularly in the UK, we do tend to neglect. So, we all, well, not all of us, but many of us make the effort to eat well, go to the gym, perhaps reduce stress, but not many of us generally tend to focus that much on sleep patterns and sleep habits. And it's actually a cause of a lot of illness in the UK. And it's something that I think if we all focused a little more on, we could reduce many illnesses. So the optimum amount of sleep each night is 7 to 8 hours. And this does vary from person to person. You know, some people will be absolutely fine on 6 hours sleep, whereas others will need at least 8 and possibly 9. So you need to work out what really works for you. But I would be surprised if you're having less than 6 hours and you're really at your optimum health and also thriving. And sleep deprivation not only affects things like your hormone levels, but it also affects your appetite. So if you're looking to lose weight or perhaps gain weight even, one of the things I would definitely focus on is trying to boost your sleep and your quality of sleep, not just the quantity of sleep. And then also I'm sure you'll know that if you're tired and lacking in sleep, you're less likely to exercise. You'll have more cravings for comfort foods and unhealthier foods. So often, instead of focusing on your exercise and the way you're eating, simply just focusing on your sleep will have massive effects on your health and your energy. So how can you ensure a good night's sleep? Well, here are just 5 very simple tips. And the first one, which is quite a big tip, and this is for someone who's really struggling, so perhaps you know that you are, you have been diagnosed as an insomniac or you have been struggling for a while, is to reset your cycle. And this just means going to bed and getting up at exactly the same time every day, and even at weekends. And I know that we all enjoy lying from time to time, but one of the worst things that you can do for your sleep habits is to be getting up at 6 a.m. every day during the week and then sleep until 11 at the weekend, because it's just going to throw your body clock completely out of sync. So number 1 would be reset your cycle. Number 2 would be declutter your bedroom. So as much as possible, try and have your bedroom for sleeping. Try and get rid of any work, any laptops, any technology in your bedroom. And that means things like mobile phones, TVs, because they will just stop you switching off. And also it's been shown that even with things like the blue light that's emitted from technology, that can affect your melatonin levels, which is something that helps to sort of regulate your body clock and your sleep cycles. So even though you're not necessarily using that technology, simply just having it in your bedroom could be affecting your sleep. The third thing would be to eat your evening meal and exercise at least 2 hours before bedtime. Ideally a little less. So if you know that, for example, that you are going to be coming home late and you are going to be having your evening meal quite late, you might want to consider having a bigger meal at lunchtime and just having a smaller snack in the evening to prevent your meal affecting your sleep. We've mentioned caffeine already, so limiting your intake and having it earlier in the day. And then again, just trying to avoid too much technological stimulation in the evening. So my final subject to talk about would be exercise, and I'm not going to talk too long about it. Again, I could probably do a whole webinar on exercise, but just looking specifically at exercise and energy. We all know that when we exercise, we feel better. Our energy levels seem higher, whether it's due to the endorphins that are released when we go for a run or even just a nice walk, whether it's being outside, whether it's just simply because the blood is flowing around our bodies, whether it's because we feel more confident. All of these factors can help to make us feel better. But also energy has a real big link with mood and creativity, and also performance at work and productivity. So what's good to know that studies have found that there's no difference in these factors, so things like performance and memory and mood, between very intense exercise and just moderate exercise. So this means that even going for a walk can have all of these beneficial effects on your energy and your happiness. So you don't need to go and pound for six miles on the treadmill. You could just go for a 20-minute walk at lunchtime, or even before work. You could get up and do 10-15 minutes of stretching, or gentle swimming, or whatever you like to do, because that's also really important, is that you choose an activity that you enjoy. Because if you choose an activity that feels like hard work, you're never going to stick at it. Morning exercises are also much more likely to stick with it than people who decide to exercise in the evening. And that might sound obvious, but it's just something to note if you are thinking of starting a new exercise routine, as are team exercises or people who exercise with a friend or a colleague. And just something to note again that I've just briefly touched on is that it doesn't all need to be very high intensity, go, smashing it out in the gym. Choosing very high intensity exercise all of the time can actually have detrimental effects on your energy levels, and also on things like your hormone levels and your immunity. So it's a really good idea to mix it up a bit. So yes, it's great to do high intensity exercise and some cardio work to get your heart and your fitness levels up, but also think about choosing some lower intensity exercise, so things like walking, gentle swimming, yoga, Pilates. Really try and combine all of those things to have that optimum benefit on your health and your energy levels. So before we finish, I just want to sort of recap on all of the areas that we've been through. And I just want you to take a couple of minutes perhaps to yourself just to think about all of these areas and which area you might need to, or even just want to, focus on. So if we recap, we looked at the foods that will boost your energy levels, so fruit and vegetables, or vegetables and fruit as I switched it round to, your whole grain unrefined carbohydrates, the essential fats, boosting water intake. I've missed one out, it was lean protein, we can add that one in there. And then we looked at the foods that will hinder your energy levels. So we had caffeine and alcohol, your sugar and refined carbohydrates, your processed foods and your red meats and processed meats. We then looked at the foods for your sleep quality and checking that your sleep habits are doing well for you. And then finally we looked at exercise and activity levels. So I'd recommend, and obviously it's completely up to you if you decide to or not, perhaps just picking one area to focus on for the next month. And a good idea when you've picked an area to focus on is to write it down, keep it somewhere where you're going to see it every day, whether it's putting it on your fridge or in your wardrobe or in your mobile phone or on your email, and then also sharing that goal with someone. So it's just going to make you accountable. Often we say, I want to do a bit more exercise, or I'm going to eat a bit healthier. But if you don't actually tell anyone that you're going to do that, it's very easy to just let it slip and think, okay, I'll start next week. But if you're sharing that goal with someone, it can really help you to stick with it. So hopefully you've all been motivated to pick one area to focus on. And I just wanted to very briefly mention the weekly wellbeing course that is available to you. And something that is great about this course is that it does help you to set some of these daily and weekly goals in all of the areas that we've covered today. So it's very easy to join and take part in online, and you'll have the details of that already. So I would encourage you to do that. And thank you all for listening. I hope I haven't rushed through that too quickly. I know it was quite a lot of information, but we do have some time for questions. So if you do have any questions, then I'd be happy to answer them now. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing some questions from you.
Thanks a lot, Ruth. That was absolutely amazing. I've got a lot of tips there to be able to go back with in terms of my diet and generally just bettering my life. A little bit daunting, in fact, because there's so many. Yeah, we have quite a lot of questions, actually, some really good ones. So Chris Bashar was the first person to ask a question, and he said, how do we treat honey? Is it pure sugar, and is it good or bad?
That's a really good question, Chris. Thank you. And it's one that I do get asked a lot. Unfortunately, honey does have the same effect in the body as sugar. So it will increase your blood sugar levels really quickly, and then you get that dip very quickly after. So yeah, generally we need to, well, I'd recommend not having tons of honey. Having said that, you know, if you like a bit of honey on your porridge, a teaspoon of honey is not going to kill you. It's if you're having, you know, a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons that it could add up. So in moderation, like everything, a little bit of honey is fine, but it is sugar at the end of the day. So yeah,
Brilliant.
Limit it.
Okay, great. Rebecca Woodman also wanted to know, does natural sugar differ? I suppose this is related actually. Does natural sugar differ to refined sugar, and is natural sugar included in your 6 teaspoons? If it is, how do you achieve it?
The 6 teaspoon recommendation doesn't include natural sugars. So yeah, you could have a piece of fruit and that wouldn't be counted in that 6 teaspoons. So that's a very good question as well. I should have made that more clear.
That's great. Thanks for clarifying.
But it does have the same effect on your body. So if you had a piece of fruit, although the fibre in the fruit will help to slow that release. So it's a tricky one. I would say with all fruits and foods that contain sugar, again, it's about moderation. So if you're having lots of fruits, it is sugar, so it will have that similar effect if you have too much of it.
Yeah, I suppose it links to what you said early on in the webinar about ensuring that you try not to drink too much juice, because despite it being natural sugars, it's a lot of sugar to take in.
Exactly, yeah. So eating the fruit where you have the fibre as well will have a much better effect on the body.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, another question from Leslie. Does Ruth have any suggestions for people who don't eat fish and therefore can't get the benefits from oils and oily fish?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are ways that you can get some of your omega-3s from things like walnuts and flaxseed, although I know that they're quite specific foods. So I would say if you're someone who doesn't naturally like nuts or seeds, then you may want to consider taking an omega-3 supplement. And I would not generally recommend supplements without knowing any more about your health history. So I'd say if you are going to think about taking a supplement, then always speak to your doctor or health professional before doing so, because some supplements can interact with perhaps other medication that you're on or other health conditions. But if you know that you are someone who doesn't have any oily fish and you're not likely to start eating perhaps walnuts or flaxseed, then you may want to consider taking a supplement.
Great. Thank you very much. Another one is from Michael. I think this is more to do with the kind of insomnia or sleeping issues part that you covered. He said, is reading before bed from an e-reader disruptive or bad in any sense?
That's a good question, and not one that I'm 100% sure on, but I would guess because it's an electronic device, it would still emit some of the similar blue light that you get from other things like laptops and iPhones and such. So I think probably if you are struggling with sleep and you do tend to use an e-reader, then that could be a reason. But I'd have to check that one out. So
yeah,
I can't be clearer on that.
From purely anecdotal evidence, I used to read from an e-reader in bed and had insomnia, and I have to say that it wasn't good for my sleeping. So again, only anecdotal evidence, but it might be helpful. Another question from Mary. Does drinking your fruit apply to homemade smoothies?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. Smoothies can be really great depending what you put in them. So I'd say if you are making your own smoothies, and generally smoothies are slightly better than juices because you tend to keep a lot of the fibre because you're blending the whole fruit rather than sort of sucking out the juice. So smoothies can be a really great way to get some fruit and vegetables into a diet. But I would say if you're making smoothies, limit the amount of fruit that you put in. So perhaps use half a banana and then a lower sugar fruit. So things like berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, they're all quite low in sugar. So use those rather than your exotic fruits, so things like bananas and mangoes and papaya, for example. So choose some of the lower sugar fruits and then perhaps limit them to 1 or 1.5 pieces. And if you can, add perhaps some veggies in there, so things like spinach, avocado, all taste really good in a sweet smoothie. Avocado makes it really creamy, or you could add some natural yogurts and some milk or some almond milk if you prefer. So just so you're not getting tons and tons of fruit in just that drink.
Yeah. Well, that's a great answer as well. Let me see what is next, because we've got a couple of email addresses here which I will pass on. Stevia. Somebody wondered if stevia, being a derivative from cane, is a good solution or substitute for sugar.
So stevia is one of the sweeteners that has certainly gained a lot of publicity over the last couple of years, and it's actually one that I would generally recommend. It doesn't tend to have many side effects, and it doesn't have a big impact on your blood sugar levels. But having said that, with any sweeteners, we don't know the long-term effects of them. And also, the body is quite clever in that, well, it's very clever, but it's very clever at recognising when it's receiving sugar. So one of the problems with many sweeteners is that if your body thinks that it's about to get sugar, it kind of switches on these mechanisms to deal with that sugar. And then if it doesn't actually get that sugar, it's all gone a bit out of sync and it doesn't quite know how to handle it. So it can not only sort of then increase your cravings for the actual sugar, but it can also affect things like your insulin levels. And so I would say with any type of sweetener, I'd be a little bit cautious. But stevia does seem to be one of the better options if you are going to use a sweetener.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you very much for that. I think we're going to get down to the last one or two here. Somebody here, Christina, she's just referenced corn products and asked if eating them has the same effect as eating a lot of processed food.
Corn. That's something that I'm kind of, I guess, on the fence about. It is quite highly processed, but then it does have its advantages in that it's a good protein source. It's low in saturated fat, so it can be a good alternative to red meat. For example, if you're choosing it as a mince option. But I would say it is highly processed, so I would be wary about having too much of it, like anything. And again, it's that boring old message of everything in moderation.
Yeah.
I'd say once or twice a week, that's absolutely fine. Perhaps, if you're having corn products every day, you might want to consider going for some more natural protein sources.
Okay, great. The final question that we'll go with is from Grant Mickelson. He says that he doesn't drink or consume any caffeine at all, and he exercises 5 to 7 times a week but still has a sleep issue, and wondered if you had any advice, any kind of tips or tricks for him to try and improve that.
I would certainly look at things like, your stress levels. because anxiety and feeling under pressure is one of the main reasons that people struggle with sleep. And it might be that you decide to try perhaps some mindfulness techniques or some meditation techniques. There are some really great apps out there available now that you can easily find some meditation techniques for. But also looking at the timings of your exercise. So it could be that if you, like I mentioned, you're exercising in the evening, perhaps your body is kind of still wired up and the adrenaline and all the exercise hormones are still rushing around your body. But also just making sure that you have a good hour at least before you decide that you want to get into bed to really try and unwind, because often we're trying to cram our evenings with so much, whether it's work or catching up with people or catching up with errands and things to do at home, that we just expect to go to sleep and suddenly be able to switch off, whereas we really need to take at least a good hour, maybe even 2 hours, just to kind of slow the body down in the evening, whether it's just something like having a nice bath or laying on the sofa reading a book for a while.
Great.
Hopefully that will help a little.
Yeah. Actually, I will ask just one more, because I think that it's probably a useful one for anybody listening. What's the difference between coffee and tea with respect to caffeine, and where does green tea lie in that, in terms of kind of the amount of caffeine that's in those drinks?
So coffee tends to have much more caffeine than tea. Instant coffee has less caffeine than your filter coffees or your espressos. So if you are someone who knows you drink too much coffee but you can't quite cut it out completely, perhaps switch down to some instant. I know it doesn't taste as good, but the caffeine content will be less. When it comes to teas, black tea probably has about a third or a half the amount of caffeine as coffee. Remember that green tea, although it's a good healthy choice of tea, it does still contain caffeine, so don't drink too much green tea late at night if you are struggling with sleep. And then all of your fruit and herbal teas, things like red bush tea is a great caffeine-free alternative if you like the taste of tea but don't want that caffeine hit.
Brilliant. Well, I think that that's everything for questions. I hope that everybody's enjoyed the webinar. I think it's been fantastic, very insightful, and I really enjoyed the presentation. So I'd just like to say thanks to Ruth.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks to everybody for listening, and we shall be back again soon with another webinar. If anybody has any questions at all, just email them to me at info@webinarsteam.com. And the mailing list I shall supply to anybody who's left their email address here. I shall supply to Ruth, and she will get in touch, I imagine, in due course. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and have a very nice week. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.